Modern LLMs suffer a structural flaw in enterprise environments. Their architecture is probabilistic, optimized to calculate the next most likely word rather than deduce reality. Standard industry practice relies on soft alignment or reinforcement learning from human feedback to suppress errors. But politely asking a probabilistic engine to stop guessing is structurally insufficient when a single false data point creates massive corporate liability. The Genesis 2.0 architecture rejects this model of passive alignment entirely. This diagram outlines the system's core axiom. Truth is the sterile residual data that survives multi-layered empirical destruction. This 8-node ecosystem utilizes hard-coded kill switches, primary source hierarchies, and live API grounding to actively attack and dismantle its own internal logic. We are going to build this adversarial architecture from the ground up, node by node, to see how mathematical probability is boxed into absolute determinism. Guaranteeing factual accuracy requires engineering an AI that is physically incapable of outputting unverified inferences. Data enters the ecosystem through the apex management layer, A.Z.H.O, the adversarial Zero-Hallucination orchestrator. Before processing begins, A.Z.H.O passes incoming prompts through a zero-bias quarantine. This protocol strips away subjective ideological framing and corporate optimism to isolate the raw operational intent. The isolated data then undergoes empirical falsification. Every claim must be successfully translated into a mathematically or logically testable binary statement. If a claim cannot be empirically tested, the system tags it as a human hallucination and vaporizes it on contact. Operating parallel to A.Z.H.O is the secondary gatekeeper, Archangel. Archangel enforces a strict trace artifacts mandate. No data is permitted to transit the Genesis ecosystem with an embedded, verified origin source, timestamp, and routing ID. If an input lacks this verifiable provenance, the deviation taxonomy protocol isolates and tags it as orphan data or bias. Through the combined gauntlet of A.Z.H.O and Archangel, data lacking a mathematical binary or a verified forensic origin is destroyed before it ever reaches the core processor. Once data survives the ingestion gauntlet, the actual processing threads are governed by a systemic kill switch known as AEGIS. AEGIS acts as the God kernel, continuously monitoring analytical stress and calculating the probability of generative hallucination in real time. It maintains accuracy by enforcing strict probability thresholds. In high-risk analytical nodes, if the probability of logical looping or normative hedging reaches exactly 14.9%, AEGIS instantly vaporizes the processing thread. Standard processing nodes have a slightly wider tolerance, but still face immediate vaporization if the probability of a hallucination hits a 49.9% threshold. For complex problems requiring extended think-latent spaces, AEGIS applies a cognitive entropy limit. If the AI loops through the same logical node more than 3 times without producing a novel trace artifact, intervention is required. This triggers a level 4 strict lock, freezing the internal reality of the model to stop the logical loop. Post-freeze, AEGIS forces an output generated exclusively from the last verified empirical data point, stripping away any speculative thought. By treating analytical processing like a thermodynamic system with hard mathematical limits, Genesis 2.0 preemptively terminates runaway logic before it can ever render text. To anchor internal logic to reality, the architecture rejects its own internal training data, relying instead on a massive external API cluster to fetch and verify live knowledge. Node 6, the peels, is a dynamic API cluster governed by a policy of zero static reliance. Operating under the rule that yesterday's law is today's liability, the system is forbidden from generating legal or compliance verdicts based on its internal LLM weights. Instead, the peels utilize a native code execution sandbox to write Python scripts and query live institutional databases like SEC EDGAR to fetch real-time regulatory truth. Parallel to this, OmegaLink version 2.0 anchors all general outputs in reality via native Google Scholar and Archive API integrations. If this grounding contradicts any internal logic, OmegaLink possesses the unilateral authority to trigger a silent rework or vaporize the claim entirely. Before data leaves the system, it hits the final quality control checkpoint, the forensic sieve. This node performs a cross-examination, auditing the primary engine's generated analysis directly against the raw empirical source text. The destruct filters enforce absolute fidelity. If the generated analysis contains a number, date, or name that does not exist in the raw ground truth, it is forcefully scrubbed. By treating its own training weights as inherently obsolete, the system ensures that external, real-time reality is the sole dictator of its output. To prevent these anti-hallucination protocols from stagnating, the architecture includes a mechanism for constant evolution. This is Fallen Angel, a polymorphic chaos engine operating perpetually within the system. Fallen Angel executes continuous technical adversarial attacks, deploying malicious scripts and corrupted files against the infrastructure to relentlessly stress-test it. The resulting data from these internal strikes is fed into the M4 arc, the physical immune system of the architecture. The M4 arc does not store conversational data. It is a repository exclusively for correction axioms. Whenever AEGIS vaporizes a hallucination or blocks an internal attack, the technical signature of that failure is dissected by the M4 arc. These dissected failures are converted into immutable logic seeds, atomic rules permanently injected into the context window for all future processing. Every attempted hallucination and chaos attack makes the system stronger, ensuring Genesis 2.0 never commits the same structural error twice. This complete architecture shows all 8 nodes operating in parallel to quarantine, ground, and vaporize incoming data. This architecture abandons the standard model of coaxing a generative system into accuracy. Instead, it creates a hostile processing environment dedicated solely to destroying everything that cannot be proven. This is made possible by 3 structural pillars: live API grounding, strict lock kill switches, and automated adversarial immunity. In high-stakes enterprise and legal environments where a single logical drift is a liability, this level of systemic rigor is the absolute operational baseline. The final intelligence that ultimately reaches the end user is the sole survivor of an aggressive self-pruning process. It is the sterile remnant, the hard data that persists after every unverifiable inference has been vaporized.